Hello. Welcome to another video on our channel. Here we translate testimonies from people who have had near-death experiences and other spiritual experiences. Today, let's learn the story of Ezekiel Matthews. He says he died and met a being from beyond the grave who told him something shocking that would happen after the Olympics. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. Leave a comment with your name and city. Let us now listen to Ezekiel's testimony. Hello, my name is Ezekiel Matthews, but everyone calls me Zeke. Today I'm here to share with you a story that completely changed the course of my life. A story that, even after so many years, still moves me and makes me reflect on the true meaning of our existence. I was born and raised in Galveston, Texas, a coastal city full of life and stories. My childhood was like that of many other boys in the region: sunny days at the beach, afternoons fishing with my father, and nights listening to sailors' stories in the port. I had a typical Southern American upbringing, with traditional values and a strong community presence. My family has always been the pillar of my life. My parents, John and Mary Matthews, were simple, hard-working people. My father was a mechanic and my mother was an elementary school teacher. I have an older sister, Rachel, who was always the sensible one in the family, while I was the rebel, the dreamer. I grew up with a mixture of curiosity about the world and a certain restlessness that I couldn't explain. From an early age, I felt that there was something more than what my eyes could see, but I didn't know exactly what. This feeling led me to seek out intense experiences in adolescence and early adulthood. At 22 years old, now in 1976, I was your typical carefree young man. My days were filled with parties, loud music, and a constant search for something that I didn't even know how to define. I worked temporary jobs, just enough to maintain my lifestyle. I didn't have big ambitions or plans for the future. I lived in the moment, without thinking much about the consequences. It was at this time that the event that would change everything happened. A night that started like so many others, but became the turning point of my existence. An experience that took me to the limits between life and death, and that showed me a greater purpose than I could ever imagine. Today, as I tell this story, I am a different man. The decades that have passed since that night have changed me profoundly. I learned valuable lessons about life, about love, and about our connection to something bigger than ourselves. And, most importantly, I received a message that I believe is crucial to the future of humanity. This is my story, the story of how I died and came back to life, and how that journey prepared me for a mission that is yet to come. A mission that, I believe, will reach its crucial point after the 2024 Olympic Games. It was a Friday night in July 1976. The air was thick with the heat of a Texas summer, and the streets of Galveston pulsed with weekend energy. I had just left a party at a friend's house, where we spent hours drinking, smoking, and dancing to the rock and roll music that defined our generation. Looking back, I know I shouldn't have gotten behind the wheel that night. Alcohol coursed through my veins, mixed with the effects of the marijuana we had smoked. But at 22, I felt invincible. The idea that something bad could happen to me seemed absurd, far from the reality I knew. I got into my old Chevrolet, a car I had bought used with the savings from a whole summer working at the port. The engine roared as I turned the key, and soon I was on the road, the windows open letting in the warm night air. The road leading out of the city was dark and winding. As I moved away from the lights of Galveston, the world around me seemed to get darker and darker. The full moon hung in the sky, a silent presence that seemed to watch my reckless journey. I was driving too fast, the adrenaline of the night still pumping through my veins. The music was playing loudly on the radio, and I sang along, feeling free and invincible. That's when it happened. On a sharp curve, I lost control of the car. Everything happened so quickly that I barely had time to react. The car skidded, tires screaming against the asphalt. I tried to brake, turn the steering wheel, do something, anything to regain control, but it was too late. The impact was deafening. The sound of writhing metal and shattering glass filled my ears. I felt my body being thrown forward, the seatbelt cutting into my chest. My head hit something hard, and for a moment, everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I was trapped in the car's hardware. The pain was intense, almost unbearable. I tried to move, but each movement sent waves of agony through my body. The smell of gasoline and burning rubber filled the air. I tried to scream for help, but my voice was weak, almost a whisper. The road was deserted. There was no one around to hear me. I began to feel panic set in, the reality of the situation finally hitting me. It was then that something strange started to happen. The pain started to lessen, not because it was getting better, but because I felt like I was disconnecting from my body. It was as if I were floating, moving away from the scene of the accident. Suddenly, I could see myself from above, as if I were hovering over the crash site. I saw my bruised and bloody body trapped in the wrecked car. It was a surreal sight, as if I were watching a film about my own death. It was at that moment that I realized I was dying. The fear I initially felt was replaced by a strange sense of calm. A deep peace enveloped me, as if all of life's problems and worries had simply disappeared. Then a light appeared. The light started as a distant dot, quickly growing until it completely enveloped me. It was no ordinary light. It was intense but not blinding. It emanated a feeling of warmth and comfort that I had never experienced before. It was as if he was being embraced by pure energy. As I floated in this light, I realized that my consciousness was sharper than it had ever been. All my senses seemed amplified, and at the same time completely different from what I knew on the physical plane. I wasn't seeing with my eyes or hearing with my ears, but somehow, I was perceiving everything around me with stunning clarity. It was then that I noticed the presence. In the center of the light, there was a figure. It wasn't exactly a human form, but an indefinite silhouette enveloped in a golden glow even more intense than the light around me. It had no face, but I could feel it was watching me. I didn't hear a voice, but the words reached me with surprising clarity. The first message I received was deeply personal. Ezekiel, your journey on earth is not yet over. Your father wants you to return. I felt a wave of emotion go through me as I thought about my father, the pain my death would cause him and the rest of my family. But before I could fully process this information, the presence conveyed something else to me, something that would change the course of my life for years to come. The world will face major changes after the 2024 Olympics. Humanity will reach a turning point. You have a role to play in preparing for these events. I was stunned by the magnitude of this revelation. I wanted to ask questions, to better understand what it all meant, but before I could formulate any thoughts, I felt a force pulling me back. The sensation was like being sucked into a vortex. The light began to fade, and the peace I felt was replaced by a growing urgency. I was returning to my body, and with that, I felt pain again. The impact of the return was intense. Suddenly, I was back in my broken body, feeling every wound, every fractured bone. The peace and clarity I experienced gave way to confusion and physical suffering. I heard distant voices, sirens. Someone must have found the crash site and called for help. I vaguely remember being pulled from the wreckage of the car, being placed in an ambulance. The flashing lights and the paramedics' voices, everything seemed like a blur. I wavered between consciousness and unconsciousness, struggling to hold on to the life I had almost left behind. The last thing I remember before I lost consciousness completely was a clear, sharp thought. I need to live. I have a mission to accomplish. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital, wrapped in bandages, with tubes and machines around me. Dr. Michael Thornton stood beside me, his face a mixture of relief and astonishment. He told me that I was very lucky to be alive, that my survival was almost a miracle, but I knew it wasn't luck. It was a purpose. Something, or someone, had brought me back for a reason. And as I struggled to recover physically, my mind was filled with questions about what I had experienced and what the future held. The near-death experience was not just a moment of spiritual transcendence. It was the beginning of a new journey. A journey that would lead me to discover abilities I never knew I possessed and prepare me for a future I could not yet fully understand. The days that followed my awakening in the hospital were a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries. Physically, I was a wreck. Multiple broken bones, deep lacerations, and a serious concussion kept me bedridden for weeks. But as my body struggled to heal, my mind and spirit seemed to be undergoing an even deeper transformation. The first thing I noticed was a change in my perception. The colors seemed more vibrant, the sounds clearer. It was as if my senses had been fine-tuned to take in more of the world around me. But it wasn't just a physical issue. I was beginning to feel the emotions of those around me in a way I had never experienced before. My family was constantly by my side during recovery. My parents, John and Mary, took turns staying with me. I could feel the relief and love emanating from them, but I could also sense a deep concern that they were trying to hide. My sister Rachel visited every day after work, her usual skepticism mixed with silent gratitude that I was alive. It was during one of these visits that I first noticed the heat in my hands. Rachel was telling me about her day at work, but I could tell she was hiding pain, not emotional, but physical. Without thinking, I reached out and touched his arm. Immediately, I felt a warmth flow through me to her. Rachel stopped mid-sentence and looking at me in amazement. "Zeke, what did you do?" she asked, flexing her shoulder. "The pain is gone." I didn't know how to explain it. How could I tell my pragmatic sister that I had somehow healed her pain? That since I came back from the dead, I could feel and alleviate the suffering of others. I chose to change the subject, but that moment remained engraved in my memory as the beginning of something new and inexplicable. As my physical recovery progressed, these strange experiences became more frequent. The nurses commented on how much better the patients seemed to feel after my visits to the common room. Dr. Thornton noticed that my own wounds were healing at an unusual rate, but it wasn't just physical changes. My perspective on life had completely changed. The parties, the alcohol, the pursuit of empty thrills. It all seemed so distant now, so meaningless. I found myself contemplating deeper questions about existence, about our purpose in this world. And, of course, there was the message. The words about the 2024 Olympics and the big changes to come echoed constantly in my mind. I knew I had been sent back for a purpose, but I still didn't fully understand what it was or how I was supposed to fulfill it. When I was finally released from the hospital almost 2 months after the accident, I was a different person, not just in spirit, but also in the eyes of others. Friends and acquaintances commented on a change in my aura, a calm and depth that hadn't been there before. I returned to my parents' house to continue my recovery, knowing that the path ahead of me would be very different from what I had already planned. I had been transformed, and now I needed to figure out how to live with these new skills and the knowledge I had been entrusted with. The journey of discovery was just beginning, and I knew I would need guidance to fully understand what had happened to me and what the future held. In the months following my release from the hospital, I found myself on a tireless search for answers. The changes I was experiencing, the warmth in my hands, the ability to feel and ease the pain of others, the deeper connection to the world around me, were too much for me to process alone. I needed guidance, someone who could help me understand what was happening to me. My search began in books. I spent hours at the local library, delving into texts about near-death experiences, spirituality, and paranormal phenomena. I found stories similar to mine, people who came back from the brink of death with new insights and skills. But none of these stories mentioned a specific mission or prediction for the future. It was during one of these study sessions that I met Reverend Thomas Green. He found me surrounded by stacks of books, frustrated and confused. With a gentle smile, he sat down next to me and asked if I was looking for anything specific. I don't know what made me trust him immediately, but before I knew it, I was telling my entire story. To my surprise, Reverend Green listened without judgment, his eyes full of understanding and compassion. "On Ezekiel," he said when I finished, "what you have experienced is a rare and precious gift. But with that gift comes great responsibility." Reverend Green became my mentor and spiritual guide. He introduced me to meditation and contemplative prayer. taught me to calm my mind and better tune into the energies around me. Through him, I began to understand that my new abilities were not a curse or a burden, but a tool to help others. But Reverend Green was not the only one to guide me on this journey. He introduced me to a diverse group of people who had gone through similar experiences. There was Sarah, a nurse who developed the ability to see auras after a deep coma. Michael, a former executive who abandoned his career to focus on energy healing after a near-fatal heart attack. And Elena, an artist who began painting prophetic visions after a drowning experience. This group became my second family. We met regularly to share experiences, practice our skills, and support each other. It was with them that I learned to better control the flow of energy through my hands, to interpret the sensations I captured from the people around me, and to deal with the emotional burden that came with these skills. At the same time, I began to explore other practices that could help me understand and develop my new capabilities. Tai Chi taught me how to move and direct the energy in my body. Yoga helped me find physical and mental balance. I studied different spiritual traditions, from mystical Christianity to Zen Buddhism, seeking wisdom from every source I could find. However, as much as these practices and support helped me, I still struggled with the magnitude of the message I had received. The 2024 Olympics seemed so far away, and I had no idea how to prepare for the changes to come. This uncertainty sometimes consumed me, leaving me awake at night, contemplating the weight of the responsibility I was given. It was during one of these moments of doubt that I had another transcendental experience. Meditating late at night, I felt that presence again that I encountered during my near-death experience. There were no words this time, just a feeling of peace and certainty. I then understood that I didn't need to know all the details of the future. My task was simply to prepare, develop my skills, and be ready to act when the moment arrived. This realization brought new clarity to my search. I was no longer looking for definitive answers, but rather opening myself up to continuous learning and personal growth. Each day brought new discoveries, new challenges, and new opportunities to help others with my newfound skills. And so, step by step, I began to accept my new self and the path that opened before me. The journey was far from over, but now I had the tools and support to move forward, confident that I was on the right path. As time went by, I began to accept my new reality and the profound changes that had occurred in my life. He was no longer the carefree young man he had been before the accident. Now, I carried a greater purpose and a responsibility that sometimes felt greater than I could bear. The transformation was not easy. There were days when I longed for the simplicity of my previous life, when my biggest worry was what the next party would be. But these moments of nostalgia were quickly supplanted by the awareness of the gift that was given to me and the importance of the mission that was entrusted to me. My family had to adapt to the new Ezekiel. My parents, although relieved that I had survived the accident, often seemed confused by my new perspective on life. My father, a practical man of few words, tried to understand my new beliefs and abilities. He watched me with a mixture of pride and concern, as if he feared I was losing myself in something he couldn't understand. My mother, on the other hand, seemed to have a natural intuition about my transformation. She didn't question much, but I would catch her watching me with a knowing look, as if she had always known I was destined for something different. Rachel, my sister, had the most difficulty accepting the changes. His initial skepticism gave way to reluctant acceptance after the incident with his shoulder pain, but there was still a distance between us that I didn't know how to bridge. Our conversations, previously light and relaxed, were now punctuated by long silences and confused looks. However, as I began to use my skills to help others, I saw my family's attitude gradually change. When I cured the chronic arthritis of our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, I saw tears in my mother's eyes. When I helped my father's co-worker's teenage son overcome a deep depression, I saw pride shine in his eyes. Little by little, my new reality became the new normal for all of us. Dinner conversations began to include discussions about energy, spirituality, and the purpose of life. Rachel began asking me questions about my experiences, her curiosity finally overcoming her skepticism. Outside the family circle, I also faced challenges. Some old friends moved away, unable to deal with my drastic change in personality and lifestyle. Others stayed, fascinated by my transformation and eager to understand more about my new abilities. As word spread about my healing abilities, I began to receive requests for help from strangers. At first, it scared me. My professional life has also changed drastically. I left temporary jobs and began dedicating myself fully to developing my skills and helping others. Initially, I offered healing sessions for free, but with encouragement from Reverend Green and my family, I began accepting donations to support my work. Over time, I established a small healing practice in Galveston. It wasn't a business in the traditional sense, but a space where I could welcome people who needed help, whether physical or spiritual. The space became a refuge not only for those seeking healing, but also for people seeking guidance or simply a place to meditate and find peace. This transformation was not just external, but deeply internal. I learned to value silence and introspection. I developed a deeper connection with nature, spending hours meditating on the beach or walking through city parks. My diet changed, opting for more natural foods and avoiding stimulants like alcohol and caffeine, which seemed to interfere with my abilities. Each day brought new challenges and learning, but also a growing sense of purpose and accomplishment. I was becoming the person I was called to be after my near-death experience. And although the future was still uncertain, I felt more prepared to face it, confident that I was on the right path. Not everything was easy on this new journey. While many embraced my new abilities and the transformation I had undergone, I also faced a considerable amount of skepticism and, at times, outright hostility. The small community of Galveston, while generally welcoming, had its share of skeptics and detractors. Some labeled me a charlatan, accusing me of taking advantage of people's vulnerability for personal gain. Others, more religious, saw my practices as a form of blasphemy or, worse yet, witchcraft. "This is the devil's work," he shouted, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You are diverting people from the true path of God." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. At that moment, I felt a surge of compassion for the man. I could feel her fear, her confusion, and her pain. Instead of reacting angrily or trying to defend myself, I took a deep breath and focused on projecting calm and understanding. "I understand your fear," he said softly, "but I assure you there is nothing diabolical about what I do. I am just using the gifts God has given me to help others. If you want, we can talk more about this after the meeting." My calm response seemed to disarm him, and he sat down, still visibly upset but less hostile. After the meeting, we had a long conversation. Although I wasn't able to completely convince him, at least we were able to reach a mutual understanding. This incident taught me a valuable lesson about dealing with skepticism and adversity. I learned that the best response is not always to try to convince others, but rather to demonstrate through actions and behavior the veracity of what we preach. Another source of challenge came from the local medical community. Some doctors viewed my work as a threat, fearing that I was discouraging people from seeking conventional medical treatment. Dr. Thornton, who had taken care of me after the accident, became an important ally in this regard. He defended my work, arguing that energy healing could be a valuable complement to traditional medicine. Over time, I managed to establish a productive dialogue with some health professionals. I made it clear that I was not trying to replace conventional medicine, but rather to offer a complementary approach. I began working collaboratively with some open-minded doctors who began to refer patients to me who could benefit from a more holistic approach. The skepticism also came from an unexpected source: myself. There were times when I doubted my own abilities and the veracity of my experience. What if it was all just a hallucination caused by the trauma of the accident? What if I was deceiving myself and others? In those moments of doubt, I turned to meditation and introspection. I revisited the vividness of my near-death experience, the clarity of the message I received. I remembered the countless people I had helped, the positive changes I had witnessed. This helped me reaffirm my faith and my purpose. I also learned to accept that not everyone would believe or understand my journey, and that was okay. My role was not to convince everyone, but rather to be available to those who were open to the help I could offer. As the years passed, the skepticism and adversity, although still present, diminished. My constant work and the positive results I produced spoke for themselves. The people I had helped became my biggest advocates, sharing their stories and bringing others in need of help. Each challenge I faced served to strengthen my resolve and deepen my understanding of the path I was following. And with each obstacle overcome, I felt more prepared for the greater mission that awaited me in the future. As the years passed, my influence began to extend beyond the confines of Galveston. Stories about my healing abilities and the transformations I was bringing about in people's lives began to spread, first throughout Texas and then to other states. I started receiving invitations to speak at conferences about holistic health and spirituality. At first, the idea of speaking to large audiences terrified me. I was a simple man from Galveston, not a public speaker. But I remembered the mission I was entrusted with, and I knew I needed to overcome my fear to reach more people. My first big talk was in Houston, to an audience of about 500 people. My hands were shaking when I walked on stage, but as soon as I started talking about my experience and the power of energy healing, I felt a calm wash over me. The words flowed naturally, and I could feel the connection with the audience growing stronger by the minute. After the talk, I was approached by dozens of people, all eager to share their own stories or seek guidance. It was at that moment that I realized the true scope of my work. It wasn't just about healing physical pain, but about offering hope and a new perspective on life for people. Over time, my schedule became busier and busier. He traveled throughout the country, giving lectures, leading workshops, and offering healing sessions. I've learned to balance this broader work with my commitment to the Galveston community, always making time to serve local needs. One of the most significant developments was the creation of a training program. Many people who have experienced healing through my work have expressed a desire to learn how to do the same for others. Initially, I hesitated. How could I teach something that felt so intuitive and personal? But with encouragement from Reverend Green and other mentors, I developed a curriculum that combined energy healing techniques, meditation, and spiritual development. The training program became a surprising success. People from all walks of life, doctors, therapists, teachers, even some converted skeptics came to learn. Seeing my students develop their own healing abilities and go on to help others has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. My work also began to attract media attention. I was interviewed for local and national newspapers, radio programs, and even some television documentaries. Although the exposure was uncomfortable at times, I saw it as an opportunity to reach even more people with the message of healing and transformation. However, with increasing visibility also came greater responsibility. I was constantly aware of the message I had received about the changes coming after the 2024 Olympics. Every talk, every interview, every healing session was an opportunity to prepare people for those changes, even if I couldn't reveal exactly what was to come. Despite the growth and expansion of my work, I have always maintained a sense of humility. I constantly reminded myself that I was just a conduit for something bigger than myself. This awareness helped me stay grounded, even when people began to treat me as some kind of guru or spiritual leader. As my influence grew, so did my understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. I began to see how the individual healing work I was doing was linked to broader healing of society, of the planet. This led me to become more involved in environmental and social causes, seeing them as natural extensions of my healing work. Looking back, I am amazed at how much my life has changed since that fateful night in 1976. From a carefree young man in Galveston, I had become a respected voice in the field of healing and spirituality, but I knew this journey was far from over. The true test, the purpose for which I was sent back, was yet to come. As the years passed, the date mentioned in my near-death experience, the 2024 Olympics, came closer and closer. The sense of urgency I had carried with me since that fateful night in 1976 intensified every day. I began to focus more intensely on preparing for whatever was coming next. My speeches and workshops began to include more elements about global change, resilience, and the importance of collective consciousness. Without explicitly revealing what I knew, or thought I knew, about 2024, I tried to instill in people the idea that we were on the cusp of a significant transformation. In 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world, I felt like it was a prelude to the bigger changes that were coming. I saw how the global crisis was forcing people to reevaluate their priorities, to question established systems, and to recognize our fundamental interconnectedness as a species. I used this opportunity to emphasize the importance of healing not only on an individual level, but also on a societal and global level. I intensified my efforts to disseminate knowledge and prepare as many people as possible. I launched a series of online webinars, reaching global audiences. I wrote a book, Beyond the Light, Preparing for a New Dawn, which became an unexpected bestseller. In it, I shared my personal story and offered guidance on how to cultivate spiritual and emotional resilience in times of change. At the same time, I began to gather a core group of individuals who I felt were instrumental in what was to come. This group included some of my most dedicated students, as well as people from diverse backgrounds, scientists, community leaders, artists, educators, who demonstrated a deep understanding of the need for change and an ability to influence others. Together, we began working on projects that aim to create models of more sustainable and harmonious communities. We have established healing centers in several cities to not only offer physical and emotional healing, but also to serve as focal points for social transformation. As 2024 approached, I began to feel a growing energy around me. My dreams became more vivid, often filled with images of dramatic global changes, not necessarily catastrophic, but certainly transformative. During my meditations, I received flashes of insight that helped me guide my work and prepare others. However, this proximity to the scheduled date also brought personal challenges. There were nights when I lay awake, questioning whether I had done enough, whether I was correctly interpreting the message I received all those years ago. The responsibility sometimes felt overwhelming. It was during one of these moments of doubt that I had another profound experience. Meditating late at night, I felt that familiar presence from my near-death experience again. This time, I received not words, but an overwhelming sense of peace and certainty. I understood that my role was not to control the events that would come, but rather to help prepare the ground, to plant the seeds of change. This experience renewed my determination. In the months leading up to the 2024 Olympics, I stepped up my efforts. I organized a global conference on consciousness and transformation, bringing together spiritual leaders, scientists, and progressive thinkers from around the world. The event, broadcast online, reached millions of people, generating discussions about the need for a paradigm shift in the way we live and relate to the planet and each other. As the world prepared for the Olympics, I prepared for what came next. I knew that, regardless of what happened, I had accomplished my mission to the best of my ability. But I trust that we are better prepared to face it than we would be if I hadn't returned on that fateful night in 1976. The world is on the verge of a great transformation, and I am here to witness and participate in it. All I can do now is observe, be present, and continue to offer healing and guidance as we move into this new chapter of human history. Today, as I sit down to share this story, we are on the eve of the 2024 Olympic Games. The whole world is focused on this great sporting event, but my mind is focused on what comes next. Nearly 5 decades have passed since that fateful night when my life changed forever, and we have finally arrived at the moment that was prophesied during my near-death experience. Looking back on the journey that brought me here, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance I received, for the opportunity to make a difference in so many people's lives, and for the strength I found to overcome the challenges along the way. My life has been a mix of purpose and mystery. Every step I've taken since 1976 has been guided by that enigmatic message about the changes that would come after the 2024 Olympics. Now, being so close to that moment, I feel a mix of emotions, anticipation, anxiety, curiosity, and, most of all, a deep feeling of being about to fulfill a destiny long predicted. Over the past few months, I've stepped up my efforts to prepare people for what's to come. My days are filled with lectures, healing sessions, and media interviews. I try to use every opportunity to convey a message of hope and resilience, reminding people of their inner strength and the importance of unity in times of change. At the same time, I have been internally preparing myself for whatever the future holds. I spend hours in deep meditation, tuning into the energies around me, seeking guidance and clarity. Sometimes, during these moments of stillness, I feel flashes of what is to come, not clear visions, but sensations and impressions that leave me both inspired and apprehensive. My family and close friends have been an invaluable pillar of support. Rachel, my sister, who was once skeptical of my abilities, is now one of my most ardent supporters. It helps me stay grounded when the magnitude of the situation threatens to overwhelm me. My parents, we have established a network of communication and mutual support, ready to act as necessary, whatever the nature of the transformations that await us. As the world watches athletes compete in the Olympics, I watch with a different eye. Every event, every ceremony seems loaded with symbolic meaning. I see in these games a reflection of human unity and resilience, qualities that will be crucial in the days to come. As we approach the end of the Olympics, I feel the tension growing. What exactly will happen? How will the predicted major changes manifest themselves? Will they be dramatic and sudden events or subtle and gradual transformations? These questions echo in my mind, but I try to maintain the calm and clarity that I have learned to cultivate over the years. Regardless of what the future holds, I know that I did everything I could to fulfill the mission entrusted to me that night in 1976. I spread the message of healing and transformation, helped countless people find strength and purpose in their lives, and worked tirelessly to prepare the world for this new era that is about to begin. Now, as I wait for the Olympic Games to end, I feel at peace. I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, ready to face whatever the future brings. My journey since that near-death experience has taught me that life is precious, that every moment is an opportunity for growth, and that together, we are capable of overcoming any challenge. The world is on the verge of a great transformation, and I am here, with an open heart and prepared spirit, ready to take the next step on this extraordinary journey. Let the future come. We are ready to welcome it.